Are we still hopeful for Tubman next year? Is that, kind of go back and tell people, like, relax, it's going to happen, it's under control, or is there going to be some reassessment at some point?
I would jump in as a member and say the last conversation I heard is that we're on schedule and that for the intent for both Griswold Heights and Tubman Middle Schools to open in the fall of 2018-19 school year. So on track. Yesterday the board had a work session with staff right now to design the programs for what would be in the middle school. So that is another process of keeping that momentum going. I have one clarifying question for you, which is as a non-PPS parent, I don't get some of those emails, so I would love to know, when did that communication go out so I can get some context?
So the email that announced that the NYP program would be staying in Salem next year for 17-18 concluded by saying, unfortunately, that the theater schools for Tubman have not yet been decided, which really had the effect of sort of setting up an angry meeting with a relatively calm community.
I hadn't heard that particular context. I just wanted to make sure. So thank you for clarifying.
Could anybody from PPS speak to?
So I think we can let you know that this topic is actually going to be discussed with the committee tonight. That's one of the reasons the interim superintendent's here. So after public comment, please stick around. You may learn more about it.
Thank you. We'll be hearing more of the school board, not D-BRAC.
Okay, our next parent is Donnie Deschler.
Can everyone hear me if I just talk about it?
It's hard for me to take notes. I'm sorry, but I'm trying to take notes. I miss a lot of words.
It's okay, I can hold it.
Thank you.
I wasn't prepared to talk, so I'm feeling a little nervous, but I am going to lobby you to push for one system. I just think that it's the best way to keep transparency in the system. We're going to continue to have inequity in our system if we do not move to one model or the other. There is no advantage to leaving a K-8 in a cluster or having a cluster with only one middle school because we don't have an option to move in. Particularly when you're looking at where you're leaving the K-8s, the option is only for the wealthy. So that there's no advantage to that. It's still very expensive to run a two-campus school. It was expensive at the beginning. When my son entered BCS in 2010, I think 2011 was the smallest enrollment ever for BCS. So it really hasn't been overcrowded all those years. And we still had administrators at every building. We had an assistant principal in a K-2 building that read less than 200 students. So very costly to do that. So when you're looking at levers, I'm going to look at you because you're always talking about this. The capital investment could clearly be offset by looking at a different model in that area. So don't look away from that. Also, our principal is concerned about what he's going to have the ability to offer when you resize things. I mean, I think you have an obligation to offer the same programming throughout all middle schools, or at least the equality of programming, and I don't know that that can be achieved. I think what's presented as happening isn't necessarily what's happening in the system, and the quality of electives might not be what parents who want to advocate for a K-8 are getting. So I would love to see you talk to the principal to have a very clear understanding of what the FTE can bring in those situations. And also with the middle school planning, make sure that they provide you not just with their dream of what middle schools can offer, but that they provide you with a plan for what the FTE can pay for. So what today's FTE, can it provide this model that PPS is planning for? I think those are my main points.
And our last public comment comes from Brooke Cowan with Richmond.
Hey, I'm Brooke, and I know some of you, but not all of you, and I just wanted to introduce myself. I'll be coming in a few weeks to talk about soft neighborhood model with my husband Matt, who's a co-author along with me. And so I just wanted to introduce myself and then also encourage people, if there are particular things that you want to hear about or questions that you have about the model, Judy has our email addresses, and feel free to send us email because we're in the process of putting together a presentation for you. So we'd really like to tailor it to your interests and needs. So that's all. Thanks.
Okay.
I just want to push back on that whole east side. To have all of you look at the size of the catchment areas for each cluster as a whole, because they range from a catchment of 8,000 students in the Franklin cluster to 4,500 in the Roosevelt, and they sort of go from bottom heavy, and it's like it just gets lighter as it goes up. And Franklin is a big high school already, so just keep that in mind, because I feel like we're not really covering the east side yet.
All right, so now we're going to head on back for updating our agenda.
And Superintendent McCain, we're going to take this opportunity to turn the microphone over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me? I'm kind of fighting a little bit of a cold tonight, so I'm going to do the best that I can here. First of all, a couple of points. I'm here with Chris Rousseau, who is the Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning. Chris, wave your hand so they know who you are. Last night, Chris presented to a board work session the middle school model and the middle school implementation plan. And to your point about being practical, it actually has both. It has a template model of what we would like to see our schools become over time for all middle-level education, and it's the beginnings of very thorough planning for an implementation model based on the money we currently have. So it's both of those things, which is part of the reason there was some confusion at the previous board meeting. So a tremendous amount of work has gone into the planning, and I can't possibly summarize it all in a few sentences, but I will say that we've looked at facilities, we've looked at program, we've looked at how to engage the community. We've got manuals for a lot of that kind of thing. What we've tried to do is set it up in such a way, plan it in such a way that it can be carried out effectively for 2018-19. And I will tell you that in the process of doing that planning, one of the things that became abundantly clear, and I'm going to periodically look at Chris to make sure that I'm saying this with accuracy. One of the things that became abundantly clear is the amount of time to really put these schools in place seamlessly, unlike what happened with Ockley Green, is more time than we thought. In other words, whereas I thought that next year would be plenty of time, and it is if we start right now with the planning we have, we can't really delay it a moment. We have to really move forward quickly. And I've lost your thing here, so the D-BRAC committee is the superintendent's advisory committee, and I come to you for advice and counsel with what we have learned so far about what we will need to do in order to move ahead. We have learned that in order to do the in order to prepare as best we can, we need to identify the feeder schools as quickly as we can. And to that end, I am seeking your advice and counsel about how to proceed. I've got a couple of options here that we're going to talk about, and you may have we may ask Chris to make a few comments. One of the options is not the way that D-BRAC normally works, and the other is a sort of a request to do what you normally do, but in a much more expedited manner. Truthfully, if we knew what the feeder schools were exactly tomorrow, we would be way ahead of the game. And so the extent to which every month that we wait makes putting things in place more risky at the other end. And that's the key piece. So, again, you are our advisory committee, my advisory committee. Ultimately, the board will decide what the feeder patterns are. but I really appreciate you as a group that I can bounce these thoughts off of and take your advice and counsel back to the board. I particularly appreciate that Paul is here as a board member, and we have at least one or two prospective board members as well. So there are two models, and I asked Judy and Chris to make sure that I get this right. The first model would be unlike what you're used to. It would be the really rapid model. In other words, we're going to try by the end of June to identify the feeder patterns and have the board approve them. That's really fast. And what that would mean is that the administration would go back and develop a model of what we think it could look like and bring it to you for your advice and counsel. That's not what you normally do, okay? The other model would be expedited, and we would look to have you do your normal process, but much more quickly than before, where you would do the community meetings and the like. And what we would look for there is for you to finish that process and make a recommendation by the end of June, so that by at least the middle of September, the board could decide and determine what the feeder schools and the pattern would actually be. Because again, you are my advisory council, you advise me, and then I take the recommendations to the school board. Now, do you want to add some of the things about why it's important to do it as quickly as possible, Chris?
Sure, and just to take a step back, we realized at some point in the past, schools were proposed, several of the schools for each of these middle schools. What we're looking to do is to formalize it so that we can do all the subsequent work that happens. So to speak to the gentleman that spoke earlier, we know there were discussions, we know Sabin was identified as a potential feeder. We're looking to formalize it now so that we can get all those balls rolling so that schools can open in 18. Now, to speak to, I guess, the priority or our interest in having this work started now, I won't go into the weeds too much, but just to say that to bring a school online, you have to coordinate like about 26 different departments, and there's a lot of things going on in them. And they have normal work and other projects going on simultaneously. If we can start some of that work this summer, we feel that we have ample opportunity to get those schools online and to do it well. The further we push into next year, there's going to be conflicts and workflow will be interrupted, and we feel that it becomes progressively more jeopardized the further into the year to bring those schools online in an efficient and seamless manner. Again, what Superintendent McCain said is, we did Ockley in a very short time. There were many lessons learned from that. That was not a seamless transition. So just to kind of lay it out like that.
Oh, yeah. You know, I do want to say that last fall, I asked you to slow down. And what happened was we had to catch up with all the middle school work and all the planning, and because we were, you were ahead of us. And now all of a sudden, we find that we've not only caught up, but that the timeline that we thought might be effective was not long enough. So that's the reason that we're coming to you with this request for your advice and counsel as to which of those two would be workable for you. And again, I'm just looking tonight for your feedback, and I want to be clear. In terms of putting these schools online efficiently and effectively, the sooner we can identify the feeder patterns, the more certain we are that we can do the middle school seamlessly. The later we wait, the more complicated that it becomes. So model number one in terms of determining the feeder schools is that we would go back as an administrative team and come up with a scenario that we think would be best in terms of how it could look, and then bring it back to you in probably a week or two, about 2 weeks, I would guess, to take a look at. And that, again, that's not your normal way of operation, and I totally understand that. The other model would ask you to expedite your work, be more of what you had done in the past, but on a much more, a much quicker basis, so that you would make recommendations to me by the end of June, and that the board then by at least middle of September could make recommendations or could make a decision based on the superintendent's processing of your recommendation. So I'm open for questions and feedback to that end, and Chris and I are more than happy to listen.
Hi, I'm Kim McCarty. Just on the face of what you shared just now, it seems, and the fact that you've given us direction to go slower previously, it seems like you should have come with your proposal tonight to make because I'm finding it difficult to tell you one way or the other, not knowing what your proposal would be a week from now. So my proposal back then is that I'm sure people have other opinions. If we are going to go any quicker, that it be the slower version that you offered us, and that you still come back with a proposal in a week from now.
I'm Beth Kavanaugh, and I agree with Kim that initially the expedited version of our typical process sounds more appealing to me, but I feel like there are some things we've been asking for over and over that we don't have in order to do that, like questions about access, questions about the Vietnamese immersion program, things like that, that determine what feeders can go into those schools, and the remaining K-8 issues. So we need a lot more information before we can move quickly, things that we've been asking for quite some time.
I'm Pamela Kazak, and I just wanted to ask Chris a question. And I just would love to just take a second to understand, like, what types of things might be affected by different feeder patterns. Because from my perspective, our work is really grounded in creating what's best for kids. And so I just don't even know how to begin thinking about this until I understand how these choices might affect the kids at the end of what we do.
So let me just try to get a little more clarification. Are you talking about programmatically, or you're talking about, well, like the types of classes within it?
I mean, I guess you had said that, months mattered, and as, I'm just wondering, like, if it were Sabin versus, I don't know, some other school that we're feeding, what types of decisions would be influenced by which school is there, just so that the committee can better understand why the ask is so impactful.
We've done a sort of an analysis across multiple axes that we can present to D-BRAC, but I can speak in general to some of those pieces. Like take International Baccalaureate, or IB, as example. The further into the year that we go, that postpones self-study, which is the prerequisite to becoming MYP, the middle years program. So the earlier, then potentially at the end of 17-18 for the 18 school year, we could have an MYP program up and running. That would be one example programmatically. There are non-program considerations too on the facilities side. Again, I alluded to that there's 26 different departments. Many of those are operational departments that have many other tasks that they're doing. When you condense the time, then tasks get stacked up and they're forced sometimes to make choices, or if we can't make a choice, i.e. do this or that, move this furniture or that furniture, the cost goes up, and then you have to search out and find additional staff. That may sound easy in concept, especially if you have the money, but we have so many different construction projects happening that the biggest commodity, our staff, our resource to do that work, isn't always in surplus.
Thank you very much. It's just helpful to understand on a more detailed level.
So I'm taking a little time to figure out which option is kind of ideal, because both have pros and cons. But I think in terms of building a scenario to meet either timeline, that I would want to publicly acknowledge that there's been a lot of listening on how those feeders could be identified, and whether or not, at least from different parents within school communities, the degree of support that there is, because there's been a lot of listening when then Superintendent Smith rolled out her preliminary plan, what could be the feeders. Then we also had done some listening, and then parents in those communities independently had done their own community listening sessions on, if this is our middle school for Tubman or Roseway Heights, here's what we want to see programmatically. Here are things that we want to do as parents in the community to help build community across the different K-5s that will feed into it in advance. So as you're thinking about implementation and working with communities, that I want to make sure that gets submitted to you all as soon as possible. I know I've submitted that information to Brenda Fox, so she has it. But I think the sooner that this decision can be done, that it activates another layer of engagement that moves families from a what are we doing to how do we actually rally to do it, because if they get 5 to 6 to 8 months to actually do it, it gives time to do it well. So I'm just wanting to acknowledge that there's been a fair amount of due diligence on the front end that can inform how staff goes back to in fact build a scenario that we either vet and give feedback to, or we take and do listening, and then that informs guidance we give back. So either way.
I couldn't have said it better than what Jason just said. So thanks for saying what's on my mind.
When I think about, or my name's Johanna Caldrove, I'm PTA representative. When I think about our process last fall of rushing through, but how far we went from the original proposals from the district to what we ended up with, I worry about trying to do that in 2 weeks. So that's sort of where I come back with it, like, we need to have that time with the community. We've worked really hard to have trust with the community, and I would hate to see us give it up, which I think the first option would.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
Just before coming over here, responded to a Facebook post saying, when is this process gonna deliver? So I think there's at least one person out there in the community who's saying, let's do this. And I think, you know, we were supposed to be a boundary redraw committee, and then we had serious mission creep, and if you want to take back some of that mission creep, I'm all for it. And so I think it would be a real service to get a plan out there in 2 weeks for people to respond to, that you have clear criteria spelled out for how those decisions come down in terms of what was guiding it. And that, you know, this is incredibly complex, taking into consideration everything from DLI expansion to special education to focus options so yeah, I would like to see you go for it and get it out there. I mean, the running joke that some of us have had, Heather's not here, is she, is give us a weekend, a map, some magic markers, and a computer with some data and some liquid refreshment, and just get something out there. So maybe you guys can adapt that to something more appropriate to the central office. But yeah, I'd say do it, get it out there, and I think, you know, we can respond then, community can respond then. But I'd love to see you just go for it.
I agree. I think that there are a lot of variables that we I'm not sure of, and we need to, I think that having the district propose a potential set of feeder schools will help us sort of reduce the decision down to what are the key things, or the few really key things that we need to pay attention to. Because right now, we feel like there's too many variables that are not yet pinned down.
I will say, as I look at this issue, and as we've talked about it over time in terms of not just the boundary issues, and the middle school issues, but how to get in community engagement, it almost boggles the mind, the number of variables, and just about the time you think you've got them all pinned down, somebody raises several more. Yes. And I will say that no matter who does it, whether your recommendation or ours, it's not going to be perfect. It'll just be the best we can do. And then, you know, people can react to it. So if we go that route number one, you know, and I, you know, not having been here more than now 8.5 months, I wasn't here for the original mission that was given to D-BRAC, but my understanding was that it was about boundaries and not about middle schools per se. And, you know, but again, in honor of this group, because I respect you and done what I've asked you to do, even when it wasn't what you really wanted to do, I definitely wanted to, I still, you know, need your opinion, and you're a great focus group. You're my advisory committee on this topic, so. Other comments?
I think I'd like to comment on the proposals that I do concur. There's been a fair amount of listening done with communities, and there's been a lot of analysis done, and I think that to the extent that the district can leverage some of that work and create a proposal that we and or the community can provide input into, it's much easier to respond to something concrete. I think the big ask, and I guess I feel that if the accelerated timeline creates ultimately better middle schools for the children who will be enrolled in them the subsequent year, that has to be primary. That's really our goal here. So I think I would support the expedited timeline, and I just hope that the scenarios really keep in the forefront some of the equity issues and the impact of under-enrollment on vulnerable schools, which was something that we talked a lot about in our prior recommendation, last June. I think there's some good information in there, so just as you all draw up scenarios, to make sure that we keep our most vulnerable kids at the forefront.
And thank you for that comment. I know that people have talked to me about that, but that again, not being a long-term district administrator, that area is foggy to me, but it's not foggy to some of the people that are here and that know the data and the statistics, which isn't to say it'll be perfect, but that's a very important point.
Hi, sorry, I have a question about the timeline because did I miss some clarification of why would you make a recommendation before we respond?
What we would do is we would come up with a scenario to give to you and for your reaction. That would be the first one.
But, okay, where it says superintendent delivers recommendation by end of May, who are you delivering that recommendation to?
That would be the board, so that they can
So
make a
before
decision.
we respond?
No.
Because it says we respond by mid-June.
Okay, well, there may be a misnomer there, Judy. You might have to clarify it. The board would actually make a decision in June. We can't put it together. I mean, you'd have the chance to work on it or look at it prior to the board.
Let me clarify that in the more expedited process, an option will be out there. We'll get it out there. It'll be the superintendents. It won't be D-BRACs. And D-BRAC will be one of a number of stakeholders who are responding to it in a pretty short time period before the board takes action on it. So that's not a typo. It's the superintendent, basically options become available very rapidly, and they are the superintendent's option for input before going to the board. And you as stakeholder are one of the stakeholder groups that may be responding to that. So it is, as he said earlier, quite a different process than what you have done in the past.
So let me check. You're talking about the response by mid-June, when we might want to respond fairly immediately to perhaps impact what you actually send to the board. So I think that's, yeah. Okay, so that's...
Well, you could respond the day after it comes out.
Right.
but it just has to be done by mid-June.
The point is that we want your input before we go to the board.
Yeah, okay, that's understood. And to be clear, this is the entire east side? Or is this?
Please clarify what you're asking.
I'm basically, what we're talking about are the feeder schools for the 2 middle schools.
Oh, just the 2 middle
right.
schools.
In terms of the boundary issue, that's still your mission. Beyond.
Right, but there's also, well, and this is, this is where it gets complicated, because we're talking about doing the entire east side. And if you decide for a couple of schools, and then we head south and go, oh, then we've got problems. So I'd encourage you to do the entire east side, which might mean waiting until Tuesday night to know whether Kellogg's in play.
Yeah, well.
If we've been through this before, if you do it piece by piece, you end up with issues. Or potentially you end up with schools in the middle left out, like Beverly Cleary, becoming a K-8 that's pretty undersized, that has nowhere near the middle grade offerings that we have, that other schools would have.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about, I mean, I know that it's elegant to solve the whole problem in one shot. My worry is that if we try to do that, these middle schools will be delayed fairly significantly. That's my worry, that's my concern.
So I just want to clarify with option A, the staff drafts options in mid-May, and D-BRAC does not see those options until you have delivered your recommendation, and then we respond along with anyone else before the board decides. Is there an option for the staff drafts the options and D-BRAC sees them as well before you make your recommendation at the end of May?
Yes, and so here's what I would encourage you to do. So this is a very emergent topic, and this is, like, the ink is still wet here. So let me try and restate it and hope that the dates don't become an impediment, because we don't have exact dates. But essentially, it's May 10th. Some people might say this is mid-May. Within days to weeks, staff in one or the other of these has to come out with some options and try and make them as comprehensive as possible and explain the impact on our most vulnerable kids and do other things so that people like you and many other stakeholders can respond to them. The difference between the two is we're assuming that if we're going out with one big option and it's the one thing, we may, it may be the end of May, it may not, which is about 2 weeks, and then it becomes the superintendent's, right? So that there isn't a review process that's D-BRAC centered that happens before it becomes the superintendent's. So one way or another, staff's working now, and the first result is going to be available towards the end of May. Either for D-BRAC to take on for a couple of weeks and try and help shape more independently and in a more focused way, or simply as the superintendents, with D-BRAC being one important stakeholder. And if on the expedited timeline, the advantage that you get from that is the opportunity for the seated school board to vote on it before the end of this year, and then summer work can progress with more certainty. If it becomes D-BRAC's to spend some time and do some community engagement before delivering your advice, your memo, to the superintendent, maybe that happens at the end of June, and then soon after it becomes the board's. Typically, a board wouldn't act on something like that during the summer, so that's where we run into taking more time.
those two nice people up at the front will also be gone. So they will not be there to help D-BRAC defend this or to defend their own recommendation to the new board. So if we do it in a shorter timeline, there's at least that consistency, which I think might be very valuable.
Just as a very slight counterpoint to that, if D-BRAC has more ownership of it by having had more deliberations, we will be able to advocate for it more over the course of the summer, moving into the fall, in a way that if it's the superintendent's, we might not.
Paul, I hadn't really thought of that point, but I do think you make a good point there. You know, when I came to the district, the board gave me a fairly significant list of things they wanted to have done. And I've taken that list very seriously, and these two middle schools were pretty high on that list, and I went to the board, as you all know, and asked them to move it off a year. I'm really glad I did that now, that we've begun to plan this in a way that is much more seamless and much more thoughtful than what happened with Ockley Green. So, you know, my whole thing is, I worry about the transition between leadership. And, you know, somebody has got to be the person pushing this through with the administrative team. And I guess my whole thought with regard to this, having not really considered what you just said, Paul, until now, is that my idea was that I would try to leave as complete a package for my successor as possible, so that there wouldn't need quite so much lead time to actually get these schools going in 1819, because I take that mission very seriously. Even though I've only got a few weeks left, I would really like to put a package together so that my successor can actually do that. I mean, when I make a commitment like that to the community, I take it really seriously. But that said, I think, again, I'm listening to your advice here. I'm really open about the idea. I'm really listening to what you have to say. And and to your point, I really do understand that it's much more elegant to do the whole thing at one time. But, you know, I just real worry that that's going to push this out quite a long ways.
I wanted to reinforce that it would be helpful to be more comprehensive, and I'm wondering, can you be comprehensive in just a general sketch kind of way to give the community an idea of what it could be?
Can you clarify, are you talking about what we're thinking about?
Yeah, what are you thinking about in terms of the schools and feeder patterns comprehensively?
Yeah. Well, I've not put that together. You know, we as a team have not put that together, and it's not like I do it. It's like I have people I have like, was it Star Wars Data, the guy Data, right? I have data people that run the numbers. So I haven't put it together, but clearly the place to start is where Carol left it. You know, are these the right feeder schools? That seems like it to me, but anyway, what do you think?
Star Trek. So I think we have to start to that because Judy has asked some very specific questions. Are we going to have DLI programs? And would it be this program? Are we going to have IB? So we have the beginnings to those answers, to that question rather. So I think we can give a more comprehensive view of what we think will be the middle school program, given the variables that we've had to date.
Clearly, if there is an ongoing program in an elementary school that feeds a middle school, that would be incentive for us to continue that program.
Actually, can I just ask a clarifying question around the timeline? And that is, in one timeline, it looks like there is deliberates, considers input. Can someone clarify, one, what considers input means, and two, on the top timeline, is there any formal mechanism for community feedback, whether it be, I mean, D-BRAC as a stakeholder, but there are community perspectives that we learn from, and so I'm just wondering how you envision that process working from a timeline perspective?
I can try and clarify, and one thing that I would say is I've had some initial conversations with Harry, who's our new community involvement, public affairs, so that they're gearing up for what will be a formal input process regardless of the path. Clearly one would have more time than the other. What that means for D-BRAC, if there is a time frame in which D-BRAC is helping to shape things, it's essential for D-BRAC to do listening and consider that input before you provide a recommendation. The top one, where you're responding to the recommendation, I mean, clearly that doesn't mean don't listen to what anyone else says. You have already done, many of you who were here with us before, remember a lot of the work that you did before. You'll take that into consideration as part of your response, but you may not have meetings where you are going as listeners in order to collect information that you summarize to give back as part of your response. Is anybody doing that work? Yes. That work is being done. Your role in that work would be different in each of these. That's what I was trying to illustrate. Okay. And I think I want to say as well, like, this is emergent and maybe not something that's going to be settled by 7:15 and it's 7:10. So for those of you who are still mulling it, we have a little bit more time tonight, meeting with the co-chairs tomorrow. And so we do have an opportunity to try and maybe summarize before the end of the evening if there's something that you don't feel you can say now or you're not quite ready to say. So I don't want this to turn into like the last voice is the committee's voice. But you are looking for advice fairly soon.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We're kind of coming to you with a fairly, as Judy put it, emergent kind of situation here. And again, in my mind's eye, it wasn't clear to me until we got the plan where it is now, how important it was to move the timeline up one way or the other. And I'm more than happy, we're not going to decide exactly which route to go for a couple of days anyway, over the weekend and whatever. Next week I'm going to be hearing I've had another committee working on the issues that were raised early about, what about access, what about some of these other programs. And it's been an internal committee, and they're going to be bringing me some recommendations early next week. So I do recognize that that's a part of this in a different way and has a life of its own, which will be interesting in its own right.
So I just want to say, when Gabrielle et al. Came out with the first plan for Ockley, I said, hey, you can't just do it in isolation. If nothing else, you need to have a plan for the peninsula or to show what happens in the peninsula. Because if you start in the middle, then you leave the ends vulnerable. And that's when they went back and did the work. And it looks like if we were to follow that plan, you end up with Cesar Chavez being a K-8 because there's like 1.5 middle school kids. You either get 2 small middle schools, which is what we're trying to avoid, or you end up with 1 suitably sized and a K-8 left over, which is not ideal, but that's what I'm worried about happening if you piecemeal it. That when we move south, that you end up with pockets that don't make sense because of decisions that already were made. So I just have to lay that out there. I also just have to say that given the feeder patterns, the way they turned out for Ockley Green when community input was ignored and we ended up with overcrowding, you've got some trust issues to deal with in terms of if you're going to take this on. So, but I know you guys are up to it. But.
Yeah, Scott, points well taken.
Yeah. So I kind of want to jump ahead a little bit. Now that the middle school planning group is robust and active, I think it's imperative that these two train cars couple as we move forward, as opposed to having mission creep or making decisions without having all the bones or the insides kind of fleshed out. So these are 2 or 3, if you to include Kellogg, schools that'll be coming online, but subsequently there could be more coming online. And that work will have to be intimately coupled with the work that D-BRAC does, both on west and east side, as this moves forward. So we have been spending some time first recognizing that we've been on somewhat parallel but different tracks, and then converging. But moving forward, I think it's crucial that there be that intimate connection.
We want to see what next steps, as we know, I think just summarize. Okay. So it sounds like that was the purpose of coming tonight. That was, I believe, what you were hoping for, is to get that, to be able to deliver this information, which you've described to me as a real dilemma, that you sincerely wanted this group to weigh in on. And thank you for beginning that. And I think that's all for tonight, but
I would just say that as you process this more, I look forward to the chairs and to Judy and some conversation next week about debriefing us. I've not made up my mind up, to be honest with you, because I do recognize there are risks both ways, and that's why I'm here asking for your advice and counsel.
You're suggesting the feeder camera project be also part of what you want to do?
I don't think we had thought about that. I mean, nothing is in stone about the boundaries. I mean, they do change over time. It never is fixed forever. So, I mean, I guess what I'm suggesting here is that, and maybe this is a tangent, but I think I'm trying to address your question. Nothing says that if you do a comprehensive model, even that will last forever, because boundaries change, populations change, they move around. So we hadn't thought about that, frankly. What we were thinking about is, how do we bring these 2 middle schools online? Can we identify the feeder schools so that we can get busy with the business of bringing the pieces together, and getting going? So, no, haven't really thought about it.
So on our end, yeah, that's come up. As I think wherever we head with coming up with this proposal, it could include that piece. That is a part of the middle school plan, is to go back and make sure that we bring Ackley up to a baseline of solid operation, which could include I think you're specifically talking about Peninsula. Yeah. So it's been something that we've been talking about. So I wouldn't say that it's ruled out. So
one comment about that.
It strikes me that one of the questions here, or one of the ways to think about this, is there are 2 separate issues that we might be able to pull apart in our time frame. There could be the issue of which schools feed into a particular middle school, but then the exact boundaries of those schools might happen and aren't dependent on their decisions.
I wouldn't be able to speak in depth on that, but I like that idea. Identifying the schools, and then, as I interpret what you said, the boundaries kind of coming as a subsequent step. Or am I completely off base?
The subsequent step would be what the boundaries are that we feed those schools exactly, but the sort of general idea, like these 3 schools are going to be the feeder pattern, because those are going to get us pretty close, and then we'll find the exact boundaries of each of those feeder schools.
I think you guys would know the nuance of that.
Yeah, I mean, we have to know the function of each building in order to grow that. And we need to know, Jason Reynolds, what's the capacity,
We've been looking at that, and while we haven't come with a hard and fast figure, we've actually done building analyses, and more than just those 2 buildings, we've looked at a number in this process. We've been pretty thorough about that piece. And so I think we're pretty close to a number. I guess we're thinking between 500 and 600, or around 600, somewhere, 550, somewhere in that range. Okay, unless there's anything else, we're going to be on our way, and let you guys, Paul, you want something?
I have one last comment for me, which is both for staff but also for our membership, which is we're going to pivot into having kind of small group and large group discussion time so that we can really kind of put down on paper like what is our honest feeling, because we all just got this and everyone's in a different space. So we need to at least give space for everyone to understand where they individually are, and I want to make sure we preserve that. But the other thing I would acknowledge for, I think, us and for staff to consider is, we were going slow for a bit, and then we're like going 0 to 60 really quick before the end of the school year, and so there are a couple of layers to that time, and I think I'm a little anxious, nervous about, but we can find a way to get through this. But what I think is important is that this whole process was started on the premise that our job is to apply a racial equity lens to all of this. And so one way that I hope that will drive our discussion and decision making is how does a racial equity lens kind of unpack who's impacted by which timeline, and the other part of it I would offer, because our original values framework, the clause that I love to tell you guys over and over is only implement what you can financially deliver and staff properly, otherwise don't do it. And so I think it's important on us and staff to really weigh those questions through an equity lens intentionally, because we're dealing with communities that have a number of historically underserved communities who both have different degrees and mutual degrees of distrust of processes. And so we all need to call that out and find a way to build a path that actually acknowledges that and what is the most appropriate way forward. Because your timelines, cover through the board election and the bond election, but it's also covering, you're leaving in June, Chris is leaving, but also the board's going to transition. So I've been through this process where we're dealing with a values framework that could we vote on it with a current board or a new board. Regardless of, we have one shot to really give some thoughtful guidance, so we need to make sure we give ourselves the time to talk it through before we put pen to paper.
Thank you. That was really well said. That was almost exactly the point I was going to make. When the new board is seated, it's going to have an enormous number of issues to deal with. And I am afraid that if we delay any recommendations D-BRAC makes are going to end up being an afterthought, which we definitely do not want.
Thank you for listening and giving us some feedback, and I look forward to your processing this and getting back to us. Again, thank you for your work, and I apologize for the slowdown. Okay, now speed up.
We're a Maserati.
Take care, folks.
So I'm just going to step in and say we're a little bit behind schedule, and I think that was a lot for people to take in. We're facilitating a little bit on the fly here, but what I'm going to recommend is that we just take like a 3-minute break. By the way, the restrooms are right behind this wall, this concrete wall if you need it. And then we'll come back and we maybe have an equity check-in, do some small group discussion. We do have other things on the agenda for tonight, but they may not be as important as this. So that's where we'll leave it. So let's come back in about 3-4 minutes.
But no.
I think you need to say, yeah. You need to say that. You need to say, so we need to make sure that someone who's supposed to give her the mic and just like.
So we should come back, you guys.
That's a point that we makes sense. We're more prepared to Thanks, Janet.
So are we, is this the meeting? Is this the meeting? Is it a stand-up meeting now? Yeah. I know. It was. That was one of the days. What did you play? So make this into a square and then sit around. That would what is it that we're just going to show us beyond the Oh yeah, just he didn't give recommendations. It's just in his time that it doesn't.
Can we reconvene so that we can all hear each other's voices? So that's where there's a mutual arrangement.
There is.
Better good than it worse. The first two D-BRAC members in the ring are.
I see what the point is. So that's great vision. All right. Scott, can you join us? So we've heard some comments or thoughts or feedback on the superintendent's proposals that Judy has diligently been taking notes on. No, we've all had a few small group conversations in the last minute or two. So what I'd like to do now is, if we could just each go around the room, and if there's something additive that you want to share so that we can capture everyone's thoughts where they are now, I'd like to propose that, like, if you have something to add that wasn't said while the superintendent was here, shout it out. We're going to go around until we're done talking. If you've heard your comment said, please use your green card or just don't repeat it in the interest of time, because we do have more agenda items to try to get through tonight. Does that make sense, what we're doing? Claire, anyone volunteer to go first? Excellent.
So again, I'm Gina, and I'm the assistant principal over at Cesar Chavez. I wanted to go first because I'm slowly withering away here today. I've been sick the last couple days. But I did want to make sure to kind of say something. Mine's a little bit, I don't know if it's more logistical or what, but kind of my observations. So I've experienced one extreme to another and something in between when it comes to timelines. So I came to Portland from Hillsborough as the new AP at Vernon. That was the year that Rigler went K-8 to K-5 within a blink of an eye. On my end, we dealt with the repercussions of properly getting classrooms set up, as well as staffing it correctly, getting the schedule right. I mean, I came in August, and the kids had found out the last week of school, you know? So that meant, on my end, I also had to work with the community, talk about trust issues, kids who didn't want to be there, kids who, you know, that sort of thing. It took a while, but, you know, we were able to kind of come together probably around February when the kids really felt at home. On the other end, I've also witnessed, I mean, I'm like, even now at Chavez, right? We're busting at the seams. You saw our numbers were over 100% capacity. And even going through, when he's talking facilities, I'm having flashes. You know, we're having an elevator put in, and it's been done over 2 summers. And all those departments he talks about is not a joke. I mean, Elisa and I had to coordinate all those departments because we knew how it impacted our site. And it impacted our long-standing summer programs that our community depends on. And all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, we had to tell our communities that we couldn't house them for 2 summers. So, and now we're looking at not having space for next year, and the solution, because of everything that's going on, we understand there's a million things going on at once with facilities. Now we're going to have to work with finding a temporary spot for this extra class until the solution arrives, you know. So it's been, so I've seen it both on one end. And then having been in Hillsborough with the experience of my children, you know, that's where I live, seeing that, having that decision made at a certain time, announced, like you said, getting the right administration in order to kick it off, and to bring that staff together, to bring that community together, to get the facilities together. I've seen the value in that because those buildings are still running very strong because of the start that they were able to have. So for me, I feel like this is where the geeky side comes out. I actually did I observed D-BRAC last year from the sidelines as part of my administrative license, and did a write-up on it.
Could you share that?
No. It's okay. And so anyways, so I've seen all the front loading, all the voices that have been heard. And I honestly, just in what I've seen, also not hearing as much voice of the administrators that are there from day to day. Having been through this year, I've seen what DLI has learned in the expansion and what that means of expansion, the hiring, the finding the staff, and having been at Vernon, that was an IB school, the training that you're supposed to have to even get up and going before they allow you to even claim to be an IB school. I mean, just all those different logistics. So for me, I feel my own opinion would be the one where all those hard lessons learned in the last couple of years, having the people who have stuck it through put something together for us to get feedback on, I think would quickly bring that necessary time to do it right. So that's just kind of where I'm at.
So I guess this time my first meeting in the fall. My first meeting in the fall as a D-BRAC member. Superintendent McKeon also came to that meeting. And he came to tell us that we needed to focus on the Ockley Green feedback, which was an emergency at that time. It was not what I thought I was going to be a part of on the D-BRAC committee, focusing on. And I shared with some other folks here tonight that I distinctly remember Paul saying to him at that time, "We'll never have enough money, I think we should move forward." And I really didn't understand the impact of that or what he was saying until this very moment right here. Because there's so many things that keep coming up, or that will keep coming up, and if we don't stick to what we originally started with, we're going to always be sidetracked. We're going to always have something else to look at. And I feel like we're again in another state of an emergency, right? What that emergency is, I didn't catch when he was here. I'm still not clear on how we got to this emergency point tonight. So I'm feeling a little frustrated with that. I think that we need to be looking at the whole east side like we have been working our way towards since January, February. So I heard a couple things, from the two of them up front today. One being that there was lessons learned from the Ockley Green, and I would like to know what those lessons are, what those lessons were, because I feel like we're right back at that point again. Like, the other thing that was discouraging was to hear Superintendent McKeon say that equity was not his strong point, or not something that he really considered. I'm not sure of his exact words, but I don't know. I'm all over the place right now, but as far as the timeline is concerned, neither one of them are options that I feel like Paul did. Let's keep going with what we have already said we were going to do. We don't have time to keep stopping and thinking of these little small segments of trying to figure something out. Let's keep going with the whole east side. There will always be something that comes up. There will always be another issue. If we don't keep on the same track, making small adjustments here and there, I don't see how we're going to move forward.
I'm going to repeat a little bit, in that I was really disappointed to hear the superintendent say under his breath that he hadn't considered equity. And I'm also disappointed in myself and all of us, because I realized in the course of our conversation we didn't really bring it up either, other than Jason. And it makes me feel that it's really important, if it's that easy to forget, or if that it needs to be front and center on everything that we print, and remind ourselves. I think my response is that one, I would like from staff to see a proposal that's comprehensive, and I think I've already said that already, because there was nothing that was said here today that I could respond to in any meaningful way. I don't know what happened with Ockley Green. I don't know what the situations are with the K-8 versus what middle schools are possible. So I really need information to be able to participate meaningfully. And I think we should continue with the course that we're on. If getting things in place by June is a typical best practice, then this particular timeline for boundary considerations could have been set up that way, so that we could have been done with the process by June. but it wasn't. So I think we still need to take the time to do this very thoughtfully and to reserve the right, and I think somebody here said this, well, if this school is going to make a decision anyway, why can't we revisit some of these decisions about feeders, et cetera? And so I think we should empower ourselves to revisit if these decisions are made regardless and come back with what we believe are the best practices.
I'm not sure exactly where I'm at with my thinking on this. I did notice myself in this, quite a bit of the last several meetings, feeling like I have been really foggy as to the backdrop, and I think people who have been involved in this process longer already have looked at previous proposals for these two middle schools that I haven't seen. So I've been coming at this not really thinking that there's anything out there, whereas other people, I think, come from the perspective, they already know what the challenges are, they already know some competing interests that I'm just not aware of. So for me, I'm kind of anxious to get something concrete that I can analyze. But if we are going from what was kind of thought of as proposals last year before I joined this committee, maybe I just need to go back and look at those. I don't know. I would also say that I know the goal is for at least entire East Side District rebalancing. However, I don't think that if there are necessary steps that we need to take on a smaller level, we should halt all progress until we get every detail figured out, because I think at some point we could just be running around in circles and it could really inhibit what needs to be just happening.
I just wish I had the Wayback Machine so that we could go back like 2 months, so that we could go back and start talking about the map. Get everybody else the new members, to develop an understanding of what our reactions were to those proposals. And now we're faced with doing that very quickly, because it sounds to me from talking to Judy that that's basically where the staff is going to start, with an increased, better understanding of what's going on with facilities, and then hopefully some better understanding of what's going to happen with some of the educational options. If we have that, then maybe we can make some progress.
So as a co-chair, would try to keep calm as best I can, but as a member, I am so beyond over the place, but I'm trying to hold the poker face. So right off the bat, I'm conflicted, because when we started this process in fall 2014, we were given originally a two-part charge to focus on the emergency immediate hotspots, and then you pivot to the full district. And we rejected that first part of the charge within the first month of ourselves meeting. Said no, the D and D-BRAC is district-wide, so that's what we established on day one for us. And then we were, halfway through, we looked at the whole district, but then we pivoted to making actions solely on the west side, because there were more issues on the east side that needed clear decisions before. So we inherently, under my leadership, broke that trust, or tested that twice. Then a third time was this fall, when we focused, after pushing forward for the opening of Ockley Green, if it could be done well, there were some number of lessons learned, and we were in reactive space. So we, again, as a member, I felt like I have broke that initial agreement 3 times, but we focused solely on Ockley and its feeders, and now I'm asked to potentially do it for a 4th. So for me, even when I have advocated as a member that I have committed as a co-chair and a member to a district-wide process, I'm inherently violating what I have promised on day one. And so I'm like, how many more times as a member am I going to be asked to continue to undermine what I have made a promise to do? So that's where I'm like, personally, I guess philosophically, I'm stuck. Another part of this is we have a lot more information now than we did a year ago For example, in Ockley, there are things that happen that we could not have predicted. Like, we could not have predicted that an outcome of opening a middle school in that part of North Portland, that the charter school in North Portland, SCI, was going to close its middle grades. Was a factor that no one could have predicted. We acknowledge that there are things like those conditions could happen in other places, so we have an ability or capacity to acknowledge if that happens, how do we respond? And as an advisory group, how do we build that mental capacity? So there are things that I've seen us learn and the district has learned in that regard. But also when I start thinking about it from a racial equity lens perspective and thinking about the kids we're impacting, my brain goes to, as a person who's worked with Apano a lot, our immigrant students, but also our ESL and ELL students. Because one of the things that I know is that the district is trying to work really hard to improve its services to ESL students over the next 4 years. Because if they're not in compliance with ODE, they have a big legal sanction that kicks in, which is they lose all control of their ESL spending. ODE takes it over, and we're in year 1 of that 4-year plan. So for me, on one hand, I want to do a transparent due diligence process, but there's a real sense of urgency because I want to get these plans in place and see how well they're going to really impact our kids. Because the more we keep talking about what a plan should be, is another year that we're not serving our most underserved students because we know the inequities are in place, they have been documented. We have inequitable access to programs and electives, and the supports aren't there for every student equitably. It has been documented. So I'm in this balance of, I want to move forward and get it done because of the urgency, but I'm also putting myself in a position, I'm violating the promise that I keep making. So at least that is my first thought for this particular project.
So, all right, I'm speaking now as a member, not as a co-chair. So when I think about this process, one of the first things that comes to mind is how our process got started, and that this was out of the Jefferson Cluster reboundary process, and the ask from the communities that we're now opening middle schools were very much part of that. And so I think it's hard. So, and that brings me to sort of 2 places. One, wow, that was a long time ago. What's taken so long? And also how, and that part I kind of understand, but also if this was the ask was a district-wide boundary process, and we're back in a sort of Jefferson-Madison Grant cluster boundary process. And yet, I think there are some reasons that we have to, the district definitely has to open those 2 middle schools on the timeline suggested. And I think that the question for me is what's D-BRAC's role? So as Jason talked about, our role kind of morphs depending on where the district is, and we do serve at the behest of the superintendent. But I think we do 2 things. I think we need to define, in case of emergency, we will give some input as a stakeholder in the emergency process that's owned by the district. Whereas we're a district-wide boundary committee and potentially have a different role, view, charge that is broader. So that's not to say I don't think we should weigh in on this proposal, because I do think that although we are not perfect in always bringing equity to the forefront for sure, we are trying to be more mindful of that, and hopefully we'll be able to devote some time using an equity lens to whatever proposal is brought forward intentionally and publicly, and yet continue on a format where we can look more broadly at the implications and what is right for the whole East Side. So, I guess in conclusion, I think if the district comes up with a proposal, we can review it, comment on it, etc., bring our lens and our knowledge, and then hopefully continue on our district-wide path, because that was why we were started. That is how we can look at equity without a lot of unintended consequences, and hopefully get the support of the superintendent to do that. So when it's a crisis, we can weigh in. But our work is the district-wide work. And I guess at this point, if there's people have things to add that haven't been said, let's go around one more time quickly. If you don't have anything to say, just pass the microphone.
So I kind of had to laugh when the lessons learned thing came up. The 2011 bond failed. The district did some listening sessions afterwards, and then they said, we've learned our lesson. And we kept asking them for the list of lessons that they'd learned, and nothing had been written down. And subsequent, I won't go into that, but the lessons were not learned. So if they want to put something in writing, then maybe we can say, well, some lessons have been learned, but this is so frustrating. Because this should have been district-wide. It should have been district-wide. And it's been broken and broken and broken. You know, the west side split off, and now this. It's just really frustrating. And maybe we can maybe they can come up with something, and that miraculously the rest of the east side will drop out and there's no problems. But yeah. It's just frustrating that we've been waiting, at least a year to find out where's Access going to go? Where's the Vietnamese program going to go? We're waiting, the community's waiting. It's just frustrating. And I feel like if we'd gotten those two and maybe one or two other issues out there, there's sort of like, wow, is Scott and or Rigler going to become 100% DLI or not? That's still kind of hanging out there. That has to be decided before they can decide Roseway Heights. So I feel like if they just made some decisions months ago, we could have done this. We could have,
I guess I'd like to see this sense of urgency applied to this entire East Side process. It's going to constantly be at loggerheads with each other. You can't say we have this emergency, let the district deal with it, we'll respond to it. Well, I feel like I don't know how to do that if they're making decisions that then impact what we're trying to do as a whole district. It doesn't work. And maybe we would be lucky and the pieces would fall into place, but I have a hard time without seeing, and I'm a big picture person, so I have a really hard time seeing how with these little islands in there that we then have to work around, just get the sense of urgency on the whole picture. It's all urgent. And that way we can lay out a plan that's implemented over time when we can get it all dealt with when we can handle each piece.
I feel like we're a group of experts here. We all have our different experiences, our time spent involved in these different PBS committees. And having a level of expertise there should be a higher value on that expertise, I think. So last fall when D-BRAC members said we needed to look at the east side, the whole east side, and continue on with the path that we were on, I think we should have fought for that a little harder now. I think that going forward, like tonight with this information, we should say, okay, we've been working on this, we know this stuff. Maybe you haven't thought about this or you're not considering this, but we have. If there's an option where we continue on with the path that we're on and feeder school thoughts materialize from what we're already working on, pull from some of that if you want to make your recommendations to the board or to move forward. But I mean, we're here for a reason, so I think that what we come up with should have a little bit more weight, and that we should be able to say, this is what we want to do. This is how we've been working. This is how we've been coming together as a committee, and to change course again, to focus on when things slows down our process, our best practices, what we would want to see going forward. Period. So I just feel strongly that we need to keep going, and in our process we will be looking at some of that. So like, if it's there, it's there. If it's not, it's not. But like you said, we don't have all the information. I would like to also see those lessons learned on paper somewhere. Anyway.
I wouldn't mind in the time that we have left as a committee for us to revamp the agenda to move faster, but move faster on the course of what we all had already planned to do as a committee. I would like to, I appreciate what you said about us being experts. You know, I said I don't have enough information, but I do feel that PPS staff has given us a tremendous amount of information. And if we could sit down with, big pieces of paper, I think we could draw out some really good stuff to give back to the superintendent.
Okay, now I have many thoughts. I feel like this winter we have focused a lot on middle schools, which yes is important. I'm not sure that we can answer about middle schools if we haven't figured out if the high schools have the right boundaries, which when we've looked at the enrollments, it seems clear that maybe they don't. I wonder in this process, and I sort of alluded to it earlier, if there are pieces of these decisions that we can pull out without having all of the precise details and make some of the decisions at a level that are helpful for the district, or recommendations for the district in terms of, you need X number of elementary schools to feed into a middle school, you need X number of middle schools to feed into a high school, whatever those sort of big picture, in some ways levers, that we can do at the big picture level. I also recognize, Southeast, in some ways we can't do anything immediately because we don't have a middle school to open there. So how to balance that out. And I guess the other thing that I'm in a positive spin on this is while I've appreciated all of the information we've gathered this winter, I'm looking forward to doing something more concrete and having something that we can actively wrestle with.
I haven't really thought of it. I thought it was really good, but I'm blanking on it, so I'll just have to send it.
All right, well, thank you for sharing these. If you do go home tonight and think of other things, which is how I'm going to work, I'm going to lie in bed tonight and think of 10 things I didn't say, email me and Jason, please. We're meeting at 9:30 tomorrow morning with Judy, as we do every Friday morning. Okay, I'll pass it back to you in a second. So please email us and tell us to give you a call. We will. So I'm going to hand it over to Jason for his last thought, and then...
So the other thing I did want to acknowledge is while part of the immediate urgent work from the superintendent is to focus on opening these 2 new middle schools, but I think it's also important for us to recognize with the entire East Side process that we have the ability to compare it to how other middle schools on the East Side are, so getting a sense of what is the ideal state for all the middle schools as we're right-sizing, and how do they articulate up to high schools, and how to... So I think there's a chance to really kind of reset the page of like what is going to be the standard. I think that is the benefit of that whole east side piece. And so we're bringing 2 new middle schools back online in communities who lost them like 10, 11 years ago. So it's a really serious investment. So I do see the urgency in that and trying to build that forward because it's been a long overdue promise, and it's been in resolution after resolution that we're committing to this. But when I think about it too, we're giving these 2 communities who've been waiting for a long time a chance to be on par with the rest of the district, and they deserve that chance. And we deserve to find a way to give it to them finally too, because they have been patiently in their own way waiting. And I would also add too, it's like amongst us all, we have a great sense of knowledge and perspectives that I think we can leverage as political capital to put a real statement on the ground of whatever timeline we go with. But it comes with some, I would say for me personally, it comes with some very clear conditions if you want us to stay intact the way that we are for us to move forward. Because we have convened a lot, but communities have been in their own right for a long time, and they've engaged with us a lot when maps are out. We have asked a lot of them, and I want them to be able to engage with us as a way that they're finally building towards a solution that they can see is actually going to happen, not this is the ideal, we hope, maybe. It's something tangible for a change.
So Judy, I know you're typing. But I was going to.
So these are the moments when, as staff, you feel about 2 inches tall, but grateful. But grateful, really. We grappled together, so know that. What I'd like to do with the little bit of time that we have left is maybe just talk together about some of these things in a slightly more logistical sense, because we have a lot of planning to do that didn't get done. And as my darling mother reminded me this morning, the failure to plan is a plan for failure. Thanks, Mom, I need that today. So I'm not exactly sure what the next week's going to look like, or the week after the week after. Clearly there's going to be some work done. You're going to play some role in that, and there's still a whole east side. Like, that didn't change, but this is a new way of looking at it, a new way of framing things, and we're going to try and put pieces together as quickly as we can. I wanted to maybe just gauge your reaction about a couple of things. So I'm really thinking out loud. My dear colleague Laura here, and we haven't even had a chance to check in about these things, so we'll be doing more of that tomorrow. Harry and the SIPA team as well, with Maddie, so help me have a little bit more to take into that. So, question 1, how does it sound that we spend next week, you have a D-BRAC meeting scheduled for next week, digging back into what these proposals were last year, what we know now that we didn't know then, and any other of those, any decisions that have been made that we can document. Does that seem like the right use for next week? Okay, thank you.
I don't know.
Could that, okay, you're red on that. I get it. And as somebody read, so protocol, when you're red, you get a chance to say why. Go for it.
I don't think it's a bad thing to do, but again, I'm still stuck on district-wide, and what we would need to go forward to do east side-wide, I guess we should be the east side, change from D-BRAC to be E-BRAC. What are the missing pieces that are actually going to have to be decided if the administration goes ahead and says we're going to do these 2 middle schools? They're still going to have to figure out what are the capacities for each of the feeder schools and the middle schools. That's pieces that we don't have a range on, that we would need, if we were doing E-BRAC, we would need going forward, along with the specific location decisions. So I'm much more interested in going in that direction. I don't think it's a bad thing to review those things, but in the context of E-BRAC.
You bet. And let me just say that I want to remind, even as members, like, Kim, Gina being the newest to the group, and some having, like, part of this is just helping people get to the same place on this conversation, because you're not. And I regret that we didn't do that sooner, so that it could have been a more productive conversation, maybe for some of you tonight. And I know Paul's got a comment.
Yes, following up on what Scott said, not only do we need to know the enrollments of the feeders and the capacities of the middle school buildings, we also need some analysis from you two about the opening of Ockley. How many students came to Ockley because SEI closed, or ScalePack? And also, we know that there was a percentage of those feeder schools that would normally have transferred out to other places, but instead elected to go to Ockley. And has there been any qualitative analysis, qualitative SES analysis of why those families made that decision and in what numbers? And so is there any way to make remotely accurate predictions of what the communities that will feed to these middle schools are likely to do?
Quick answer. One, yes, we did analyze the SEI and other pieces. That was all part of your initial packet that you started looking at in that rush when you were a Maserati the last time and you rushed to move on the Ockley Green information. That's all included there. We did talk about and factor in the bump that the next school assignment provided. And if you go back a couple of weeks ago when we talked about our assumptions for enrollment, one of the things that we said to you is, while we may start with cohorts that are smaller, we expect over time to get to a capture rate that isn't seen at this time. So we can go back to that, and that's, I think, what we want to refresh that and bring that to light. But those are the kinds of things that, yes, we've done some work on that. I think Kim had a comment?
Question. What are the two middle schools that you're talking about?
The two middle schools are the one that you're in at this moment.
Okay, I got it.
And Roseway Heights. And for those of you interested, these are the maps. This is, I don't have all the data, and frankly, it would be old data, but these are the maps of what was talked about last year. So please feel free to take one. There's one on each side.
I think one of the things that might be helpful in next week's analysis to try and keep that whole East Side context as we look at these individual schools is make sure that we have information about the sort of surrounding schools that we're likely to impact as we make adjustments here. I mean, that's always, you have to make specific adjustments, but that affects the things, ripples out. So having some of that data ready for us would be helpful.
Just want to clarify. So, Paul, for example, you were talking about, was there a drop in applications going to, say, Da Vinci because Ockley Green existed? Was that?
Yes,
yeah.
that's it, exactly.
And the answer is no, because we didn't make the decision about Ockley Green until after that. But there were definitely other kids, and like we didn't even make the decision about Ockley Green until after the transfer cycle ended last year. But there were still kids who might have made other choices that wound up at the middle school. That is an important factor, and it is part of the modeling that we will be doing in building what we think will happen at these two middle schools. Okay, anything else that you would like for next week?
And then Judy, just following up on what you just said, have you looked at the transfer cycle for this year? And comparing that to previous years, are we getting a bump now?
We're implementing new software, and we haven't even finished the transfer cycle for this year. So I would love to say that yes, we have, but we will be able to have comparative analysis certainly within a couple of weeks God willing, there's a lot of very patient families out there who are ready for us to get that job done. Okay, anything else for next week that you think would help make that a productive meeting? I want to then move on to what happens after that. So at this point, your calendar is you've got a meeting scheduled next week, you're off the following week, and then you have a 4-hour work session on June 1st. And the purpose of that work session was to allow you to take a deep dive into other ways of assigning students or other ways to prioritize student assignments. The soft neighborhood model, as Cowan today, as well as socioeconomic diversity. Given the information that you heard today, given what you know now, which we did not know when we set that schedule, does that still seem like an appropriate use of your time? I'm very pleased that Brooke is here because you'd be the first person that I would call if we were going to make any changes to that. Is that still what you want to do with your time the week of June 1st? Any feedback on that? I understand you've been wanting it for months. Okay, let me say something rather selfishly as well. The very same staff that needs you just to support you to be ready, not for the soft neighborhood model necessarily, but for other elements, is the very same unit that's now driving to results for the superintendent. And I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to have you come forward and not feel like we've prepared you well. So that's my nervousness and uncertainty. And if superintendent comes back next week and says, I want you, D-BRAC, to spend more time helping me on this, will you take time in early June to do that? The very same time you're talking about is the time that you've allocated to something else. So, yes.
I'm sorry. Did we decide which of the options we're going forward with, or we decided we're not going to decide right now?
Did you decide what the superintendent decided?
No, what option A or B as far as timeline?
As a committee, we didn't ask you to vote.
So we're not picking those options A's or B. The superintendent is.
He is picking.
He's picking, but he wanted to get a gut check from us that we're going to be work.
And when will he let us know which option he's choosing?
Within days.
So this was an informational session for us.
Indeed.
Okay.
So, I think in response to the calendar, in terms of changing anything substantive, we have only about half of our membership. So I wouldn't, at least for me, I wouldn't want to make a clear decision or position on behalf of the committee until at least we've emailed, everyone's gotten a chance to respond. Because Lauren hasn't, Grace hasn't, I'm trying to think of who else. So I want to make sure that Heather, so I want to make sure everyone, the membership has gotten a chance to at least give feedback before a position is reached. Because, given this new action item and, we've tried to script things in a way that it was based on what we originally thought, we need to make sure as chairs that we have a clear understanding before we make a significant change in the program. So.
That's helpful. And with that in mind, actually, I think we'll talk about this tomorrow morning, but there were several people who were not here today who I know feel deeply about this. So we're going to be working to get word to them right away, and I don't want it to be too fresh. Who knows? They may already know. It's on Facebook right now. But what, like getting their notes from what was said today is something that we'll work on quickly. Okay? All right, the next thing that I want to see, yes.
Question. One of those two things presented, is one of those things going to happen? It's going to be one thing or the other?
I believe so.
Okay. So anything that we're saying about we want to do the whole east side and we don't want to pull out Tubman and Roseway Heights is kind of irrelevant at this point.
So okay, so let me ask you that this way. If by naming feeder schools for the two middle schools soon, June, September, soon, means not doing the whole east side, and you feel really strongly that that would be a mistake, which is some of the things that absolutely I know was heard today, I took notes on that, then maybe you just want to keep raising consciousness for that. But I heard I heard clearly that they want to the degree possible, establish at least the names of the schools that will be feeding these middle schools so that they can be doing the rest of the program development in conjunction with those schools. So I heard a strong desire to do those things, and because they felt there was a strong expense to be paid by kids, teachers, and others in 2018 if it weren't done. And maybe one of our challenges here is that we haven't spent enough time really talking about what it takes to do everything else and what a more holistic process feels like, requires, and how it can be accomplished. Maybe that's what's missing as a counter narrative to that.
That's not the point.
Okay.
The point is we could have been working on this entire calendar since September. We could have been working on this. And there was, we were held up on this decision.
I understand.
So I would add.
We know it's complicated. We want to give it as much time as they can. I mean, I hope I'll just say me, because I'll just,
personal.
I definitely, I'll just say absolutely. But
So I would add from a process piece a few things. One is that we have this question of, the superintendent's going to come back with his preferred both kind of timeline of how he wants to engage, deciding the feeders and how we're going to be involved. But we do, in both processes, D-BRAC has a form in which to offer a response and guidance on that kind of a question. So knowing that, I think there are a lot of very clear opinions, and I think there'll be a strong consensus in some areas, and in other areas that we're going to be fragmented, and I think that's appropriate to document if we're there by that point. But we do, but I think what I'm trying to listen for and slowly starting to pick it out is between now and whatever the aiming point is from whatever his timelines that he chooses, how do both Pamela and I work with staff to design meetings where we can pull out those different guidance pieces of how does doing those two schools fit in the context of us achieving our goal, which is to do the whole east side. We can identify pros and cons, and or if it's we need to do it all in its entirety and identify the trade-offs and the things that are missing that we have articulated in multiple memos that have to do all these questions have got to be answered. And I would also acknowledge too that when we did give our guidance back to staff on recommendations and how to pursue solving or addressing issues around aqua green, my recollection is that we did make a caveat that any recommendation that we did put forth, that we did have the option to kind of revise those boundaries or feeders, what have you, because when we pivoted to the whole east side, we wanted to do that. So we are on notice at least raising that question, and we could re-articulate that if that is essential, because what I have heard from members is, however you lock in feeders or boundaries in north and northeast, does have some degree of impact and boundaries for south. So that's that question of that east side piece. So again, to other points that have been raised, we do have a collective wisdom that I think for this particular case is essential to kind of bring up again, even though it seems like we're in Groundhog's Day, we keep talking about the same things. I'm feeling it, but I think in this context, I think we have a place for when we do have that form to give guidance, that it can be really clear and articulate about whatever way the superintendent goes forward and how we give guidance, that we can give it clearly and sharply and what the impacts are, but it's up to us to really be blunt with each other so we understand, and then craft it so that everyone who's following us understands where our perspective is, and that can help inform the superintendent as he chooses to move forward.
To formulate it in terms of what we've been talking about, if we're to look at and respond to specific feeder proposals, what I would love to have time for us to do as an opportunity is take the suggested feeder schools, and at least at some surface level, play that out into Southeast, see how so if these are the feeders for those schools, what does that do? everywhere else, even though we clearly wouldn't have the same level of detail, but just to see where are those Cesar Chavez has to remain a K-8 type of issues going to pop up.
The assumption we had to use it as.
Yeah, use some of those assumptions, map it out to a broader degree, as is our charge, without holding up the process for Roseway Heights and Tubman.
That would be test the ripples.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
To do that, we have to make some assumptions. Yes.
And we also need to know some things about like where access is going to be in Vietnamese.
Which I believe you will have information on
Okay.
very soon.
Okay.
And I apologize that it wasn't part of what you heard last week. That was not something that we anticipated right now. So we're really close to time. This has been very helpful. I guess what this means is Sheila has a comment.
It's not essential. It's not essential. I was just going to say, they're going to need to know that to do their scenarios.
Right. So what I believe is coming next is you are welcome, as Pamela said as well, to continue thinking about things that are important for you to raise now, both in terms of this process and what you think is the superintendent needs to hear to make a good decision, and what you need as a committee to continue doing good work with the district. We are open to any of that. We do have time scheduled tomorrow morning to try and coalesce some of the things that we heard, and we'll be as iterative as we can. We're saying, here's a draft of what we're sending forward. Anything that comes back from the superintendent, we'll get to you all very rapidly. Any discussions about changing your upcoming calendar, we'll try and get that out to you as soon as possible next week, because we know that, we're getting towards that time when people have other plans. In your packet is some information that I was really looking forward to sharing with you, such as the degree of enrollment changes that have been made in this district over the past. So just before we close, now I'm doing my own bad thing here. I'm just going to show you. So there's a map in your packet, and it is color coordinated, and it shows all of the changes, enrollment changes that have happened in about a 17-year period. If you have one nearby, gaze at it for a moment. Sorry, dear. Didn't mean to open that. Meant to open that. I was intending to talk to you about the levers that we use and where the policies that guide them. I was prepared to talk with you about the importance of stories in this work. I wasn't going to say much. I think slides like this kind of say it all. Data with the soul. It takes time to get past the data and into the soul. It takes trust. Don't know if you can do that in 2 weeks. But I really wanted to just bring your attention to this piece. Across our district, and this is since 2003, on the charts that are in there, it actually goes back to 97, right? So 20 years. 55 schools impacted by boundary changes since 2003. 37 schools impacted by grade reconfiguration, some of them more than once. So you'll see on your chart double X's. That's because since 2003, we both turned it from a K-5 to a K and back. 18 closures. Schools like this that were left without kids in them and without serving a community for a long time. And consolidations, 2 schools or more that become one, just immediately. And I guess as we're starting to think about, this is the district. This is district-wide information. We can drill down by cluster to see the impact localized. But a couple of things come to mind for me personally when I look at this. One, geez, by now you'd think we'd be good at it. And two, we really need to be mindful of this history and how it prepares communities for what comes next. These are the same communities that we will be talking with, whether it's this year, next year, the following year, whichever part of the east side. So if you have time to look through what's in your packet between now and next week, I encourage you to spend time with that information and to build it into your workbooks, which hopefully will still be valuable as we move forward. Can I offer Rosie, who's so patient and calm, she had one question to raise with you guys, and I wonder if you still want to raise it.
Sure.
Just one.
Because it'll take a little bit of time to think about the answer, and maybe next time you will let me know. But we are going to be moving forward and putting a new link to the D-BRAC website for middle schools. And if you've looked at what it is already from previous iterations, you know that we have archived documents, protocols, calendar of events, online surveys for families, et cetera, et cetera. The communications department would love your input on what different you might want to see in this new middle school link for the district.
It's like a landing page for
Yes.
parents, for everything that you want to know about middle schools. What would you put on that page if you could?
Yeah. So part of that would mean going to look at what's currently there for you to maybe go, oh, I like this, I don't like this, or why don't we have this? So yeah.
If you have the blue slips, I will happily take them for Pamela and I to look at tomorrow. And also, if anyone wants to know about like kind of more history on the kind of changes in the last 10 years, I did find the student assignment guide from the district online, which has all of the board resolutions that initiated the different kinds of changes we're kind of dealing with now. So it lists like the context why certain changes were done. So I will happily send that PDF to everyone as kind of an additional source material.
Do you want an oral history?
So I'll take the blue slips, and with that, thank you all very much for getting through an interesting meeting. With that, we are adjourned, and we will see you all next week.